From the Deer and Deer Hunting headquarters here in Iola, Wisconsin, welcome to middle of May and welcome to Deer Talk Now. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm Dan Schmidt and along today with a special guest from Hawk Optics, Trent Marsh. Trent, you drove up from Indiana last night and I gotta thank you very much for doing that, not only for driving that distance, but driving through some pretty wicked thunderstorms.
A little bit of rain yesterday. Yeah, just about as bad as I've seen. It was pretty bad between Milwaukee and Madison.
It was unbelievable. We had, in my rain gauge, we had like 2.5 inches, which is a pretty good amount of rain overnight, but down there they got hammered. There were some areas 4 or 5 inches of rain, bad thunderstorms, but thanks for battling it through and coming up to visit us here this week. Deer Talk. Today's a special Deer Talk that we're going to do with Trent. Trent is an industry expert on optics, and it's everything from rifle scopes to binoculars to spotting scopes. We're not only going to talk about products that Hawk makes today, but we're going to talk about some of the common questions that we all have when we're trying to either outfit our shotgun or our rifle or even a crossbow with some optics. And let's get right to it, Trent. We had some great discussions on this morning, and you also brought some common questions that you get about the optics. But the biggest thing first, let's talk about you. Let's talk about Trent. Where you came from and a little bit about Hawk Optics. Tell everybody where you came from and how you came affiliated with Hawk.
I actually became aware of Hawk through an acquaintance that I had who was working there at the time, and they were looking for somebody to kind of come in and fill kind of a floater position, help out with a little bit of everything, and I kind of have a generic business background, so kind of went in there right kind of at the ground floor on the way in and kind of took over marketing in kind of a guerrilla fashion, but that's kind of where I sit now, is really kind of how all of our marketing activities, our PR and that kind of thing. So it's been a lot of fun. It's fun to be at a company where you can kind of see what you're doing, where you can kind of affect the change on a daily basis. And with a lot of people not being familiar with Hawk, since we've only been here since 2007, you know, the brand originated out of the UK. The parent company has over 30 years
of experience
in the hunting and shooting sports, but we've only been in the North American market since 2007. So when you're in that type of a situation where you can really start to move the needle and see things move, it's exciting.
And your passion shows through, I must say, because anybody who's on Twitter or Facebook, social media, if you're in the hunting communities on these areas, you're probably either following Trent or Trent's following you, and you're having some great back and forth together. And just the passion with not only shooting sports but hunting and that whole hunting lifestyle, I think it's really, really cool. Trent, let's talk about some of these things that we have in front of us today. You know, we have obviously the first one, and one of the things that Hawk Optics became known for right away was crossbow scopes. Mm-hmm. What's interesting this year is there's quite a few states that are going to go all inclusion this year with crossbow hunting. Let's talk about that a little bit.
It's great to see this evolution and the inclusion of crossbows. You know, it helps, you know, hunters get in the field earlier and stay there longer in terms of age. You know, I've got a 12-year-old sister that's able to start crossbow hunting in Indiana, as we're full inclusion now. So, yeah, like you said, Hawk really has kind of got its niche, really kind of where it got its name was in the crossbow industry. Crossbows have an adverse recoil pattern, a little bit different than what guns do. So you have different physics that are at work on the system, so they have to be built just a little bit differently. The physics effects actually mirror that of air guns, and that's because Hawk's based out of the UK and the history with air guns there and the adverse recoil that they have. Those same physics problems we'd already solved. So developing a crossbow scope was very simple for us. It really came down to reticle design. And we've become known for designing scopes and reticle systems that work around crossbow trajectories. There's the XB1. It was in 2010 we introduced that, or 2011, I'm sorry. And it has a speed ring calibration, so you're using the magnification to calibrate to the speed of your bow. Once it's calibrated, you're using it as a fixed power scope, but it gives you even 10-yard increments. So it's just like the pins on a vertical bow. Sighted in at 20, and then you've got, once it's calibrated, you've got aim points all the way out to 100 yards.
That's one thing that one thing that I found neat on this is a really stout scope.
Yeah.
And these scopes, you're going to help me out with. You can get one of these scopes for what, $100.
The XB1 is going to retail somewhere on around that $200 price point. We have, again, because it has the variable speed technology, that it's kind of the next step up. You always kind of think of products in good, better, best. This is kind of the better. The good, the entry level, we have just our standard XB 3x32s. They're a fixed power scope built around 315 feet per second, which still a lot of the common bows are still, you know, anywhere from 300 to 330, you know, they're in that range. But then we also introduced for this year was the XB30, which the XB30 had been around for several years, but it needed an update. The speed calibration only went up to 360 feet per second, which, you know, we've seen a lot of bows cross that 400 threshold in the last few years. So the new XB30 actually calibrates all the way up to 450 feet per second.
So there's a big difference there. When you're talking about modern crossbows, and that's what we want to get into a little bit, is the pros and cons. We'll get into that in a second, but these things have that technology built into them. You just can't take any old scope, throw it on your crossbow, especially if you're buying a brand new crossbow with that kind of speed to deal with. Okay, so we were talking about crossbow hunting in general. Wisconsin here, where we're sitting right now, full inclusion this fall. Iowa, New York. I think did we hit all of them there? There are others.
The big three.
Those are the big three that are starting this year. What are the biggest thing that I see, because I have not shot a deer yet with a crossbow, is, and a lot of guys will ask me, and I don't really know, what are the pros and cons? Okay, I'm going out to buy a crossbow either for myself or my dad or somebody else. I go into the store, I go online, and here's the package, it's all set up. Should I buy one that has the scope on it? What are some of the pros and cons with a package that includes everything right out of the box to be able to go?
Crossbows typically are available only as packages. You know, we've kind of gotten used to, you go in and buy a vertical bow, and you buy the bare bow because you already have the sight that you like or the stabilizer that you like, and that's kind of the way that the industry's approached it. With crossbows, it's really been kind of a, you know, here's everything, and it comes with the quiver, and it comes, you know, because there's less accessorizing. Comes with
arrows and everything else.
Everything's coming right with it. And again, kind of back to how we kind of got to be known is, you know, we work with crossbow manufacturers directly. For years, we've made the Red Hot line of scopes and accessories for Parker. That people are familiar seeing that, you know, if they see Red Hot, they know that's a Hawk product that we've helped Parker develop. And just a couple years ago, we saw Mission Matthews enter the crossbow arena, and when they entered the crossbow arena, they came to Hawk and said, you know, we recognize you as an industry leader, and we want to use your product. And Hawk's standard product is going out on every one of the Mission Matthews bows. So, you know, there you can kind of see where you've got, you know, Hawk is a premium crossbow brand in terms of optics, so you have those available. There's other brands that have kind of more, it's just kind of like going and buying a rifle package. Kind of the first thing you do is take that scope off and put on the scope that you like.
So if I'm going to buy a Mission or a Parker, almost 100% chance I'm getting a Hawk.
You're getting a Hawk.
A premium scope on there. So that is a cool thing. I mean, you go out and you buy a package, and that package already has, like you said, you're not taking it off and putting something else on there. Let's go the other route as far as, what if I get a crossbow, either I buy a used one or I got one on sale somewhere, got my bare bones crossbow. What are some of the things I need to be thinking about when going to, you know, because a lot of guys are intimidated by that. They don't know the differences. What are some of the things I should be looking for in the crossbow that I got and the optics I should put on it?
When you're going to go to pair your crossbow with optics, a lot of it's going to come down to what is your crossbow capable of. You don't need to necessarily go get a scope that can calibrate up to 450 feet per second with a 300 foot per second bow. You know, we have, again, those entry, the 3x32s, very, very well thought of. I mean, you can't find bad reviews on them. They're a solid scope that you can get into for, you know, anywhere from $100 to $150. You know, if you're not in that premium next level crossbow, you don't need a premium next level optic necessarily. That said, you know, we have there's bows like Scorpid going 425 and starting to challenge that 450 mark. one of those fixed power scopes with a 315 foot per second reticle isn't going to be your best choice. You're going to want to find a scope that works with the capabilities of your bow itself.
Really good point there, and I know we're going to get to this same discussion when we talk about rifle scopes, but let's stop there for a second and think about it. If I buy, let's say I went somewhere and bought a used crossbow that's 10 years old, I'm not going to put a premium scope on that thing, probably because the efficiencies just aren't there.
Right.
And that would be like taking a premium scope and putting it on a used older crossbow. It's like putting mag wheels on a rusted out Buick that I'm driving from 15 years ago.
No,
so I mean that is a good point.
The optics have come a long way, but so have the bows. And it's the same with vertical bows. I mean,
so what you're saying is,
it wasn't so long ago that we could sit here and go 300 feet per second out of a vertical bow is, it's just crazy. Yeah. Well, now we've long since surpassed that, and it's really the same with crossbows. So as technologies have to evolve, it may be that the optics technology you don't need for the bow that you have, and there's a lot of bows out there. Like I said, my little sister's using one of the Parker Challengers, the youth bows. It's a 300 foot per second bow. We're not putting an XB30 on that bow. It doesn't really need it.
It doesn't need it. I mean, it might be nice, but it doesn't need it. So
exactly.
that's the point there. If you're going out crossbow hunting, or you're going to take up crossbow hunting this year, find out what bow you have first. Find out what it's capable of shooting, and then match your optics to that crossbow. That's just right there in itself is a great piece of information to have. Let's move from crossbows. We have a bunch of categories I'd like to get to here today, is to rifles. And the question I want to ask you, Trent, because it's a question that I think everybody has, is, well, let me put it this way. What's the most common question you get from a guy who is looking at a rifle scope for his rifle?
A lot of times in the office we get I just bought a new 30-06, what scope do I need? And at first blush you kind of look at that and go, okay, that's a good question, but are you using it for long-range bench shooting? Are you using it for bear hunting in northern Minnesota? Are you using, the caliber of the gun, kind of just painting with broad strokes here, the caliber of the gun is the least important thing to think of when you go to purchase a scope. Now there are exceptions, and we'll get to those. But at the end of the day, the purpose is what's going to dictate the scope. If you are using it for, like I said, black bear hunting in northern Minnesota, where you have a 50-yard shot tops, you don't need a 4-16 scope. It's just too much. You may put a 1-4 on a 30-06, and on top, you first say that, you go, well, that doesn't make sense. But again, if that's the purpose that you're using it for, the purpose is going to dictate the magnification and some of those particulars of the scope. Now, there are ballistic reticles. We have the Marksman 223 reticles this year for
a ballistic reticle, for people who don't know.
It's been calibrated specific, kind of like with the crossbows, been calibrated specifically for that round. So are you going to want to use a 223 reticle on a 30-06? Well, no. So again, there's kind of one of those little caveats. But, are you using the 223 to, the design of the reticle is for long-range shooting. So if you're not long-range shooting, you're not even going to be using the Marksman reticle because you're not going to be shooting to 600 yards. So again, the purpose kind of weeds out what your options are.
Now, what about the guy who says, well, I will use it for bear hunting, but I also wanted to go out west this year and hunt in Wyoming for whitetails. Does that make a difference as to what you recommend, or do you take a different approach?
And that's where, if it's going to be an all-purpose rifle, then you kind of have to have an all-purpose scope. The 2.5 to 10, and I actually have a 2.5 to 10 right here, the new Endurance 2.5 to 10. The 2.5, you've got good low end, so you can use that for 40 and 50 yard shots pretty easily. But a 10 power, you're still able to reach out there fairly long distance and feel comfortable with the shot. Over magnification is something that a lot of people, they just assume the more magnification the better. And a lot of times that's just not true. It's tougher to stay stable with the higher magnifications, especially if you're spot and stalk for elk or antelope or something like that, where you're moving around and you're not on a bench and don't necessarily always have a good rest. Target panic is talked about with bows all the time, but it exists for rifles too, because magnifying it 16 times, you're not just magnifying your target. If you're in a tree stand, every time that tree sways, magnified 16 times. Every breath you take, magnified 16 times. So you can really get into a situation where the magnification is detrimental to what you're trying to accomplish. So really the 3 to 9 is a, kind of the...
3 to 9 is kind of the standard.
The standard.
For a deer hunter who's maybe hunting a little bit off the ground and hunting out of a tree stand.
Exactly. That's a good chassis. It has the low end at 3. It has the high end at 9. That's just kind of become the standard rifle scope. 2.5 to 10. I actually like the 2.5 to 10 a little bit better. You've got a little more low end, a little more top end, and typically those are coming in a 50 millimeter chassis. So you've got lots of exit pupil. So low light performance isn't an issue.
So a 2.5 would be probably a really good choice for somebody. I mean, on the low end, for somebody who is hunting out of a tree stand, who might be using that same stand for bow hunting.
Exactly.
You get a closer shot. Like I said, you get a little bit higher magnification, low light, 40 yards. It might be a little bit more difficult.
Well, and that kind of hits on another thing too is, hopefully everybody, grew up with somebody to hunt with that they could kind of learn this. But when you walk into the woods, what do you have your scope set on?
I always have it set on the lowest power.
The lowest power. Yeah. Always.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want is for that buck that you've been chasing all year to jump out at 50 yards and your scope's on 10 power.
I actually keep it on the lowest until the very last minute, and if I'm sitting there hunting and I can tune it up. Interesting. It's interesting that you bring that up. We did show this on the website last fall when my daughter shot her first deer. We had that scope and I had her trained, tuned all the way down, and when she finally shot that deer, I had her crank it all the way up. But it was a little increment at a time, a little increment at a time. And she looked at me and said, "Dad, I know what I'm doing here." And it was really cool to see that because she was only 10 at the time. And she knew that she had to keep that down and then turn it up as she was focusing in on that deer because she didn't want to just zoom it all the way up. And it's like, I can't see the deer now.
Right.
So that's a good piece of information. Very interesting that it's, I guess if you look at it on its face, some of that, is common sense. But it's stuff that I know I even just kind of forget about. When you're talking about, it's like, okay, I want to go put a new scope on my rifle. Well, you might have different rifles for different applications. This might be my long-range deer gun. This might be my deer gun that I'm going to go hunt out of my tree stands with, and you're going to want to pair your optics with that. Let's move from rifles now to shotguns and muzzleloaders because I know there's some differences there. I've had some very good experience with the Hawk Deer Pass scope. Let's talk about the Deer Pass. How did that system come to be, and what's in store for it?
Again, kind of the same thing as shotguns and muzzleloaders for the most part. They're a lot like crossbows, where most of the ballistics are going to fall into 16 to 1800 feet per second. That's just what you're going to get out of those guns. So there have been other shotgun muzzleloader reticles in the last few years. So we developed the Deer Pass system that essentially works the same as our crossbows. It's a speed calibration. You're sighting in it at 50 yards. Once you're done at 50 yards, you're replacing those turret caps and you're using your magnification to calibrate that drop to 100. And once you've got that drop calibrated, then the rest of those aim points drop right in to 225 yards. And I know, we talked about it at SHOT a couple years ago. Not everybody's comfortable with a 200-yard shot, and that's fine. It's same with crossbows. We're not saying you need to go out and take a 100-yard shot with a crossbow at a deer. That's, you're still using archery equipment. That's not a good decision, but long-range practice is important.
Exactly, and that, is long range. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Long range with a shotgun, I liken that to shooting my bow, because I'll shoot my bow at practice 60, 70 yards. I'll never take a shot that far.
Right.
But with the Deer Pass scope, the way you guys have that set up, I can practice 150, 175 yards out there, all the while knowing I'm probably not going to take a shot. I mean, I've known guys that are really good marksmen who can take that out to 200 yards and even beyond that a little bit.
Right.
I'm not quite that comfortable yet,
right.
But that's a good way of putting it. A little bit more about the Deer Pass. That actually is almost a rangefinder built into a scope.
That does have some range finding brackets found in that are right in there, so that because it's a second focal plane scope, without getting too optics nerd on you, that your reticle is always the same size. As you change magnification, that doesn't change. On a first focal plane, it does. So what that allows you to do is, if you have a fixed distance, like nose to ears, 12 inches on your typical whitetail, 40 inches chest to rump. When you have those type of known distances, known measurements, then you can put those right into the reticle so that on, say on this power, which is 6 for the deer pass, you can use this as a bracketing system, bracket that deer, and whatever yardage marker then that ends up being corresponding to, all right. You don't have to guess, is he 175 or 225? I can't tell. You can bracket that deer looking right through your scope, know exactly which aim point to use. And on a, crossbows and muzzleloaders, that they're not a 270, they're not a 30-06. There's a lot of drop there. A 50-yard difference is the difference between filling a tag or going home angry. That makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And the thing about the deer pass that I really liked was, like I said, you look at it and you almost, just from the price point, it's $100 to $200-ish scope, which is very affordable, number one. Number two, I found it almost to be idiot-proof. I mean, we've got the video of me shooting some deer down in Illinois. Jamie Wilkinson's shooting some deer down in Illinois with this scope. I've been using it for 3 years now. To me, it's, and I don't even like to say this, it's idiot-proof because we put it on, I sighted it in, I shot maybe a box of slugs, which is only 5 shells.
How's your shoulder?
Through that gun, that's fine. I put it in a lead sled. Trust me, I will not shoot on a range without a lead sled. But you get it sighted in, and it's kind of like, okay, that's it. It's all ready to go. The one thing that I should back up, because I wanted to talk to you about this, and we've had some discussions on this. Let's talk, because that is the thing that I think that the average guy or gal goes on, looks at the scope and says, I mean, these deer pass scopes, we got a chopped deer right now, you can get one for 69 bucks. And it's like 69 bucks, it's, must not be that good of optics. That's a mistake to think that way. And the one thing that was always pounded into my head over the years, and we've talked about this, is, it's all about the glass, and it's all about the coatings on the glass. And you're saying, well, yes and no.
Yeah, it is. It's yes and no. Everything with optics is a trade-off. At $70, the deer pass, no, you're not going to get the same features that you're getting in, the new Endurance that's going to run you, $350. You can't do that. You're not going to get that. But at the same time, you can develop optics that deliver performance without breaking the bank, and that's really what Hawk has tried to do, is provide value. If you're providing value for the dollar, regardless of the category, you're going to be able to find a customer base. And the big misconception, and Al Clemens wrote a great article about this early last fall, late last summer, is not, the conception is that every scope brand has its own glass factory, and we're all kind of in our little huddled corners, and we're all doing everything differently. The components for optics are coming from very few places in the world. So
you said it's only a handful, right?
Yeah, there's really only a handful of places that it can come from, and Alan had some great quotes from different people, not just me, but different people from within the industry that, really everybody's stuff's coming from just a few places. Now, do we have certain things that we're designing a little differently? Yeah, of course we do. That's what makes us who we are, and everybody else who they are. But to say that brand X uses better glass than brand Y, it's really just not true, because the chances that they're coming from the same factory in a given price point is pretty close.
Pretty close. That glass is actually from yours to anybody else's scope might be coming from the same companies.
Exactly.
That's interesting to know. So I mean, the other thing, like I said, there are differences. Like you said, the deer pass that's unique to Hawk in that scope, and there are some things. But so that shouldn't make me shy away.
No.
As a consumer, I'm looking at this product, and for me, I just want something that performs.
Right.
And I can get performance, like you said, without spending more than what I spent on the rifle to do it.
Optics,
I want to kill deer.
Exactly.
I want to go out there and I want to kill a deer, and when I aim at it, I want to hit it. That's basically what I want to do.
And optics are something that's tough to buy without seeing it. And we are still relatively new, and maybe your local shop doesn't necessarily carry Hawk for you to go in and look through them, and that's just part of the growing pains. There's other optics companies that have a 50 and 60 year history where people just don't question what they're looking at. They just buy what they need, and we understand that you want to pick up a hawk and look through it, but you don't see a lot of people unhappy when they actually do look through a hawk.
I'm not unhappy at all. I'm actually very pleased with everything that I've used, and that like I said, I'm just basically a results-driven kind of hunter, and that's what's important to me. One last topic I want to talk with you about, Trent, are your binos. I know you have other things going on here too, but some of these new binos, we used these last year, and I was just extremely impressed, not only by, like I said, you pick them up, they're very stout, they got a lot of nice features on them, and from a bino standpoint, what are some of the things, again, common questions you get from deer hunters? What kind of binoculars should I buy? I'm a bow hunter, I'm a western bow hunter, I'm an eastern bow hunter, I'm a long-range rifle hunter. What are some of the tips that you can give to a guy who's looking at either upgrading or getting a brand new pair of binoculars?
A lot of the same principles that we talked about in terms of over magnification. It's a big problem. You know, a lot of people buying 10s when 8s are plenty. You know, if you're deer hunting in Wisconsin, yeah, there's spots where you might be able to glass a deer at 400 and 500 yards, but those are pretty few and far between. You're hunting hardwoods, you know, you're hunting bear over bait, or that kind of thing. You're not looking 400 and 500 yards. And
so I'm a bow hunter, and I want a good pair of binoculars for my archery adventures, and I'm hunting mostly hardwoods. What kind of power would you recommend?
8 power.
8 power.
Really, until you get into a situation where, again, you're out west, or maybe you've got some long cuts that you know you're going to be glassing, their 10s may be adequate. Some people just prefer 10s, and that's fine. But 8s, they're going to be, again, everything in optics is a trade-off. So do you want a little more magnification, but you're moving more in the tree, so it's tougher to stay on that deer? Or do you want an 8 where you can stay on him better and see, is that a kicker or is that a weed? You know, when you really start trying to look at those, field judging deer isn't easy to begin with. Would you start doing it in a 15-mile-an-hour wind in a swaying tree? Would you give up a little bit of magnification for a clearer view of the deer, or do you want all the magnification, but you're moving around and maybe not able to stay on that deer?
It's a good point you make there, because that's what I want to use here when I'm bow hunting. But now, last few years I've been hunting out west, and I've noticed, and I've made the mistake of taking not enough magnification with me, and my eyes get really sore, because that's all you're doing is you're glassing all day long. Yep. What are you going to recommend for the guy who's either glassing long distance food plots for hours on end, or a guy who might be hunting out in Wyoming or Montana or some of these places where you spend a lot of glass time?
It's where you get into really handheld binoculars. Unless you're going to put them on a tripod, I would stay away from anything over 10 power. So
if you're hand holding it, you would stay away from anything above 10 power.
Right. I'd stop at 10. For wearing on your harness, for around your neck while you're out hunting, 10 power. But then that's where spotting scopes start to come in. If you're really talking about serious long range glassing in excess of 500 yards for extended distances, you can't do that with binoculars. Whether they're 12, whether they're 15 power, you can't stay steady enough to not have issues looking through glass all day. And that's where, again, we do have a full line of spotting scopes where something like a 16 to 48 or a 20 to 60 magnification is going to be your better option. Then you can really, you can see that there's deer 500 yards away, but is he a 120 or a 150? That makes a big difference whether you want to cover that 800 yards and put a good stalk on him. That's, then binoculars just aren't going to do the job for you.
All right, with that, let's let me check my time here. We do have to go, but let's check. Tell me what's new in store for this year on the binocular end from Hawk.
The Sapphire EDs are new this year for Hawk. They were kind of a soft launch and kind of went away, and we worked on a few things, and now for 2014 they are back. You've got an open hinge chassis like we have in the Frontiers, a dual hinge design, but then we also have the Sapphires available in a top hinge design, a little more compact, slightly lighter, for if you're sitting in a tree stand, that type of thing, where maybe you want something a little more compact. Sapphire EDs, that's what's new this year.
The website where people can find out all the information on the new products and more.
It's going to be hawkoptics.com. That's HAWKE optics plural.com.
Hawkoptics.com. And what we want to tell everybody, there are many places where you can buy Hawk Optics. ShopDeerHunting.com is one of them. We don't have all of their products. We have a select few items. The specials this week, you got to check out the Deer Pass scopes, $69.99. That's not going to last forever. We only have a few of them left at that price. But if you want to put a good scope on your shotgun or muzzleloader, I'd highly recommend that. That's the Deer Pass. That one you're not going to get the Deer Talk discount because we're basically giving those things away at 69 bucks. But the discount, the Deer Talk discount does apply this week for the Hawk Crossbow Scopes, the Deer Pass EV scopes, which is a higher end Deer Pass scope, and the Hawk bipods, which are a discontinued product, but we have them there. So if you want a bipod for your optics needs, we do have some of those left at shopdeerhunting.com. That you're going to get a 10% discount if you just type in Deer Talk in the checkout code when you check out, or you can call the toll-free number too. That's it for this week. I want to thank you, Trent, for joining us. That's so much. What I really like about this is you don't talk over my head. I mean, you're telling me exactly, like I said, what the average guy wants to know about optics and scopes and binos and stuff like that. But thank you very much for joining us today.
Appreciate you having us.
Driving up and going through those storms. That's it for this week. Join us next week again when we have another special guest on Deer Talk. I'm Dan Schmidt with special guest Trent Marsh. See you next time here on Deer Talk Now.